Just Trains' West Coast Main Line Preston to Carlisle route is well known in the TSW community for its high quality, and now we have a new addition to improve the rail scene on this route. Said new addition is the Class 86 electric locomotive, and as always, this video is not sponsored by the developers, nor am I aligned with any developer, be they Just Trains or someone else. I bought the Class 86 add-on with my own money. The Class 86 was first announced for TSW in December 2024, during Dovetail's largely farcical Season of Reveals, but it wasn't until the 15th of July 2025 when she was finally released. I played TSW 5 on a PC, and bought the Class 86 add-on from Steam, where it costs £20, or 36 New Zealand dollars, at full price. That's a fair bit higher than what I thought was the norm for Locomotive add-ons, and why it costs that much is beyond me. Considering the large amounts of previously announced add-ons, updates, and remasters that have been postponed until after TSW 6, I wonder why the Class 86 wasn't held back too. Same goes for Rivet's upcoming West Midlands and Cross Country Class 170 pack. Come to think of it, I also wonder if DTG are intentionally holding back the other things, such as Cargo Line Volume 5, Transport for Wales Class 142, Great Western Express Remaster and Class 158 Timetable on 5 Circle, etc., to try and increase sales figures for TSW 6. This is despite the fact that we've already been waiting an absolute toad's age for the Great Western Express Remaster and 5 Circle Timetable update. And before anyone rushes to bring up the free starter pack, I am well aware of it, but its presence does not make DTG's decision to hold back all those add-ons and updates automatically immune to criticism. The starter pack is only temporary, so anyone who misses out on it, for whatever reason, will have to buy TSW 6 proper. And even when the starter pack is available, I very much doubt that every single person in this community is going to want to upgrade to TSW 6. And now for a brief history on the Class 86. This was a standard electric locomotive for the West Coast Main Line, based on experience with the 5 prototype classes, otherwise known as classes 81, 82, 83, 84, and 85. 100 examples of the Class 86, originally designated as AL6, were built in 1965 and 1966, and put to work hauling freight or passenger trains on the West Coast Main Line, where they helped to replace steam locomotives, the last of which were withdrawn from BR service in 1968. Incidentally, the Spirit of Steam add-on, or as I call it, barely captures the spirit of steam, features a route that would go on to be electrified in the early 1960s. The 86s had numerous modifications over the years, which resulted in 6 different subclasses, but only one was included in the TSW add-on. The subclass in question is Class 86-2, a designation assigned to 86s that were fitted with improved suspension to keep them running at their top speed of 100 miles per hour. Otherwise, the locomotives would have remained as Class 86-0 and had their top speed reduced to 80. The 86s were successful locomotives, hauling passenger and freight trains on the West Coast Main Line, Great Eastern Main Line, and other routes for many years, with the final examples in regular UK service not being withdrawn until 2021. These days, 3 Class 86s are preserved in the UK, while 31 of their classmates have been exported to Bulgaria and Hungary, of all places. Incidentally, stock footage of a Class 86, of all things, appears in the music video for Over My Head by Tony Basil. At least, I'm pretty sure the locomotive is a Class 86, and I can also tell that the footage is from the 60s because of the locomotive's livery, and her original 4-digit headcode box is clearly visible, although she's only on screen for a split second. Why footage of a British locomotive, instead of something American, was used in the music video is anyone's guess. But regardless, this isn't just a plug for the criminally underrated Over My Head song, not to mention its extended mix and the rest of Tony's second album, but also for the video I made about parasocial relationships, in which Tony Basil is a major topic of discussion, along with Brett Cooper and Sydney Watson. The video isn't the first time I've come clean about my struggles with mental health, and I don't normally ask people to share my videos, but I'm making a rare exception for that one about parasocial relationships. The video includes some advice to anyone else who may be in a similar situation to me, and, come to think of it, here's a warning ahead of distressing news at the 7-minute and 27-second mark. I realise that I've been rambling for a fair bit at this point, so to avoid getting sidetracked any further, I will now return to discussing the Class 86 in TSW5. As for the specific contents of Just Trains' Class 86 add-on, we'll start with the liveries. The manual states that 8 liveries are included, but technically it's only 2, namely British Rail Blue and Intercity Executive. There are 3 different variants of BR Blue and 5 variants of Intercity Executive. 5 of the included variants are fitted with jumper cables at each end. This allowed for communication, via a system called Time Division Multiplex, between the lead and trailing locomotives when they worked in multiple. Now I don't know about you, but personally, I think the Class 86 looks better with the jumper cables fitted. Besides the jumper cables, other noteworthy features include, but are not limited to, a wide array of 3D nameplates, a fully detailed and accessible machine room, although you'll need to crouch down before entering, and depending on which variant of the locomotive you've got, there's also a high-intensity headlight. Of course, you also get authentic sounds supplied by Armstrong Powerhouse, as was the case with the Class 87. Just Trains also went to the effort of modelling specific details for individual locomotives. For example, here's 86209, City of Coventry, which was fitted with a Bracknell-Willis high-speed pantograph instead of the usual Stone-Faveley AMBR, as seen on most of 86209's classmates. Other noteworthy members of the class include 86225 Hardwick, which had a so-called rally light instead of the standard high-intensity headlight, and 86233 Laurence Olivier, who wore this unique variant of BR Blue with the cab roofs painted white. One wonders how much time and effort went into research for these locomotives. Even if only for her name, another notable member of the class was 86258 Talyllyn, named after the world-famous Talyllyn Railway in Wales. On a personal note, I was lucky to visit the aforementioned railway in April 2025, and went for a ride behind locomotive number 4 Edward Thomas, in other words, the basis for Peter Sam. However, these nameplates are a bit too modern for the time period of the Preston to Carlisle route, which is set in 1986. The real 86258 wasn't named until April 1987. Besides the Class 86 herself, this add-on also includes the long-awaited Mk1 RMB and Mk2F coaches. The RMB was a much-requested variant of the Mk1 coach, of which we previously only had 4 variants in the game, while the Mk2F is another welcome addition. Both the RMB and Mk2F coaches are supplied in BR Blue and Grey or Intercity liveries. The RMB's interior is very well detailed, complete with a legible menu at the buffet. I assume these prices were accurate for 1986, but I could be wrong. On the other side of the counter, there's also this cabinet that has some sandwiches and pork pies in it, and they look pretty realistic. Speaking of pork pies, they remind me of when I went to Ironbridge and got one from this little green shop near the bridge itself. That was the first time I ever had a pork pie, and it was bloody delicious. Insert obligatory reference to a certain old New Zealand film here. 3 variants of the Mk2F coach are included, namely the BSO, short for Brake Standard Open, TSO, short for Trailer Standard Open, and FO, short for First Open. I prefer this later variant of the Mark II coach over the original Mark IIA variant, which, incidentally, we also have in TSW as it was included in the Northern Trans-Pennine route. The later Mark IID through Mark IIF variants are significant to me because, between 1997 and 2008, 150 of these coaches were exported to New Zealand, where most of them have since been extensively rebuilt for service in our little corner of the world. As of July 2025, you can still find these rebuilds in use in one form or another on 6 different services throughout the country, with 2 examples being Te Huia, which runs from Hamilton to Auckland, and the Wairarapa connection, which runs from Wellington to Masterton. Watch this space for a more in-depth video about the Mark II coaches and their new lives in the smaller land down under. The Class 86 doesn't add any additional services to the WCML Preston to Carlisle timetable. Instead, she substitutes into the existing timetable and can be seen on cross-country passenger services that were previously hauled by Class 87s. Apparently, it's more realistic for 86s to be seen on these specific services, and as for freight, those services remain Class 87 hauled, as it was a rare thing for Class 86s to haul freight back in 1986. By 1986, not all members of this class had been fitted with high-intensity headlights, so if you want to drive one of the engines that doesn't have that headlight, I wouldn't recommend driving this thing at night unless you'd like a challenge. Much like the Class 87, the Class 86 has a tap changer control system, but she also has a lower power output than the 87, and it takes longer to get up to speed as a result. Curiously, the 86s built at the Vulcan Foundry had 3,000 horsepower, while the Doncaster-built examples had 4,000. Why this was the case is beyond me. For anyone who's not familiar with how to drive the Class 86, I strongly recommend reading the manual or playing the in-game tutorial. Driving this locomotive may be very difficult at first, but it feels quite rewarding once you've got the hang of it. The power controller has off, run down, notch down, hold, notch up, and run up positions, so it's very different from the conventional throttles on modern EMUs, such as the Class 710 of Entra. I've noticed that the run up setting is more effective at applying power than notch up, but you'll need to hold the lever and run up, otherwise it'll spring back. Holding the lever in that higher setting will increase amps reasonably quickly, but make sure not to let the needles go into the red range, otherwise you might overload the motors and need to press the overload reset button. The run down notch will gradually decrease power, but you can set the lever to hold if you don't want to reduce power completely. As an aside, while I didn't have time to actually ride a train between Preston and Carlisle during my UK trip earlier in 2025, I did, at the very least, go train spotting at 3 stations along the line, namely Carlisle, Carnforth and Lancaster on April 23, followed by a visit to Hest Bank on the morning of April 24. I also rode aboard a Class 156 Sprinter for the short journey from Morecambe to Lancaster and back, so now I'm hoping to see the 156 come to TSW at some point. I suppose you could use TSW5's free roam mode to drive the Class 86 on other electrified UK routes, such as the London Overground Goblin line for a random example. But the variants included in Just Trains' add-on are so specifically optimised for the time period on Preston to Carlisle that it's unrealistic to see them on any other route. Come to think of it, I reckon JT should have included the Freightliner Class 86/6, or at the very least, the preserved 86259 Les Ross, for use on routes set in a more recent time period. It's also worth mentioning that the Class 86, Mk1 RMB and Mk2F coaches are compatible with TSW5's livery designer and conductor mode. Make of those features what you will. I initially thought that the Mk2A from Northern Transpennine wouldn't automatically appear in timetable mode consists with the Mk2F stock, but it seems that I was proven wrong when I drove 86207 City of Lichfield the other day, and her train mostly consisted of Mk2Fs, albeit with one Mk2A as the second coach in the consist. Thinking back to the livery designer and conductor mode, I don't use the former because of my preference for official liveries, and the latter because, if what I've learnt from watching Train Sim Society is anything to go by, conductor mode still has various bugs that Dovetail haven't fixed yet, assuming they'll ever be fixed. In conclusion, I'd say the Class 86 is one of the best UK electrics in Train Sim world, if the modelling, sounds and driving experience are anything to go by. Just that one trip from Carlisle to Preston, with 86207, was enough to convince me of this locomotive's quality. However, I would not recommend getting this thing at full price, as 36 New Zealand dollars is too expensive for a locomotive add-on, regardless of how good it may be. Keep in mind that some routes cost the same as the Class 86. But even with the high price in mind, I would still give this locomotive an 8.9 out of 10.